Professor Cheryl Hendrick is at the Human Sciences Research Council. She's been conducting some research on this. Professor, good afternoon to you. In a way, I think it must be a historic fact. Virtually all, certainly all the conflicts and wars that I can think of in the world have been caused by men.
Yes, they have been caused by men, not all of them. I think that women who have been in leadership positions have also made some decisions regarding conflict. What we have been doing, Stephen, for the last month and a half is celebrating women's roles in peace and security, globally, not just in Africa. This year marks 20 years of the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And that particular agenda emerged because women were being made invisible in conflicts that men decided on, conflicts that only depicted what men were doing. And so 20 years ago, women from the policymaking sphere, civil society, researchers got together and adopted UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which speaks to the need for women's participation in peace and security, that women are both victims of conflict but also actors within the conflict sphere, and that they should be participating more in terms of conflict prevention, peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace building.
So we want that to happen. How do we make it happen in a society? How do we... And I've got to choose my language carefully here, Professor Hendrick, because, I mean, in English you would sort of say, how do you give women more of a voice? They don't need it to be given to them. They just need to not be held down when they speak.
To open the doors, yeah. Look, we have been trying. Let me tell you a little bit about what I think are some of the achievements of the last 20 years and some of our challenges and where we need to, I think, begin to change course here. Firstly, I think that we've done a lot in terms of awareness raising around conflict and its impact on women and women's need for participation in conflict prevention. Secondly, we've developed the policies and the frameworks that need to be implemented in order to get more women to participate and to protect women during conflict situations. Here I'm talking about, we just adopted another resolution. No, we did not adopt that resolution, but we have 10 resolutions already adopted by the UN Security Council. Another one was put forward in October, which was not adopted, I believe. We have a continental results framework. The monitoring tools are in place. But when we looked at the actual shift in terms of numbers, if we started 20 years ago with 1% of women in peacekeeping, we only have 5% of women now. If we had 2% of women in mediation, we only have 6% now. So the shift has been way too slow. We have 86 countries that have adopted national action plans. 30 of those national action plans were adopted by countries in Africa, 5 in Southern Africa. And as you would be aware, South Africa has just also adopted a national action plan on women, peace and security. So the frameworks are there, but the movement in terms of participation and the movement in terms of actually protecting women, that has been slow. And this would tell us that we need to shift gear a little bit. And I think that one of the challenges is we moved from the focus of building women's capacities at local level to deal with these challenges to more of a focus of getting women into mediation processes. Peace tables can be located at a number of different levels. We can't only be looking at the 12 or 13 conflicts and the national peace tables there, because conflict occurs at a number of different levels. So how do we build the capacity of local peace builders to engage more in peace building? I think that is a key question we should be asking ourselves here. And we've been training a number of women. Thousands of women across this continent have been trained, but we're not harnessing the capacity of those that have been trained. We are also not building the peace infrastructure where women can engage more. So women, I'm not saying that we must now be stuck at a local level. I'm saying that we need to be engaged at all levels and that we must not only concentrate at the very top, but have it at all three levels here. And so I think that, as I indicated, the policies are there, the structures are even there. We even have, if we look at our national institutions, we even have women in the police force, women in the broader security sector, the military, 31%. But the security of women is not there. So we still have very high levels of SGB. So somehow the translation between representation and empowerment and protection is not there. So we have to look at those particular linkages. And okay. I think it requires us to go back to the drawing board here.
Professor, if I may, it interests me if you look at leadership positions in our society, for example. Now, if you look at conflicts, you immediately think probably of two portfolios. You look at the Minister of Defence. The Minister of Defence currently is a woman, has been for quite some time, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. From 1994, if I remember correctly, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma was Minister of International Relations, I think twice, so that's 10 years. Maita Nkwana-Mashabane, Minister of International Relations as well for a long period. Did that make a difference, the fact that we had women at the highest levels of decision-making outside of the presidency, and I must stress that, although we've had a female deputy president, of course. Did that make any difference at all, or not really?
I think it has made a huge difference. It makes a difference in terms of representation. We've been calling for 50% representation. So when we have women in those portfolios, it gives us the opportunity for representation. They open up spaces. If we just think of the African Union and Madam Zuma opening up the space for more women to come in terms of gender parity, and then also setting up the office for the special envoy on women, peace and security. So decisions are being taken that are for the benefit of women. What they lack is a critical mass of women around them that can really shift and make a dent into the patriarchal structures that they find themselves in. And I think that is the key here to unlocking change.
I mean, there's so many, other questions around it. I'm not entirely convinced, I'm afraid. I'd like to hope that it's the case, but I'm not entirely convinced that having women in top positions actually changes the course of a country. Let me explain what I mean. So, as an example, and again, an example I'm happy to be shown to be wrong on, Kamala Harris is the Vice President designate of the United States. First time they're going to have a woman Vice President. This is an immense moment. And the United States is often involved in a conflict, sometimes causes it, often involved in a conflict. Do you think it's going to change foreign policy because they've got a female vice president?
Again, men don't get asked the question when they are in power, what change do they need to bring? So you put women on a very defensive role that they now need to bring in all of these changes. We all need.
At all. The point I'm trying to make is that your argument, as I've understood it, is that having women in top positions does make a difference. I'm just saying to you, I don't know if having women in top positions does make a difference. I'm not placing any further duty upon her, but gender is important in this, or so you say.
Yeah, no, so I say, and I've indicated it in terms of representation, it's important. In terms of the decisions that they make, with a number of women in positions of either ministers of foreign policy or even president. If we look at our Scandinavian countries, for example, we see feminist foreign policies coming to the fore. So we would hope that with a woman there, it's not always the case, but we would hope that with a woman who's a feminist, who's gender sensitive, that they will make a course correction and adopt the necessary policies and programs needed to bring about change. But the point I was making, Stephen, is that women are always placed into this defensive position. Okay, so you there, now prove to us that you're going to make these differences. And that shouldn't be the case. Women have a right to representation. It's first a rights-based argument before it becomes an instrumentalist argument of women are going to do X, Y, and Z when they're in those positions.
No, sure. No, I'm with you. I would argue, and I'm going to argue against what I've previously argued now, that if you go back to 1994, there was only one female cabinet minister at the time in the last apartheid government. Almost half of our cabinet ministers are women now. And it's undeniable, while our society has high levels of violence in terms of government violence, so violence that comes from government in some way, shape or form. The levels of violence now have dropped dramatically coming through from government, and I would argue the same around the world, really. The world is a lot more peaceful now, even though it doesn't always look it. And at the same time, we've seen the role of women in all of our societies, largely, actually increasing. So in terms of, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a causal link, but in terms of the numbers, that would bolster your argument quite strongly.
Actually, if we look at what is happening, we have an increase in the numbers of women because we've concentrated a lot on counting the numbers, and not so much in terms of a decline in conflict. Since post-2010, I would say that there's actually an increase in conflict. It's the kinds of conflicts that we are seeing, so more local level conflicts. We're also seeing still high numbers in relation to sexual and gender-based violence. And so I would actually argue that there's little correspondence between the numbers of women in these positions and the actual prevention of conflict and the protection of women, that we have to do more on that score. But that is not something that just women's participation will affect. It needs a number of other structural processes to occur before that can happen.
Professor Hendrick, really do appreciate the time. Thank you very much indeed. It's a long conversation to have, a lot more to talk about in terms of that. And of course, we'll have to see if Kamala Harris does make any difference, or if it is at all related to gender. But Professor, thank you.